Hello everybody, my name is Ian Kirkpattykake. I'm an author and robot, and today we're doing a book review, or whatever you want to call it, for New Tokyo by Marc Foxx. Now, before we get started, a couple of things. Number one, if you want to be featured on this channel, check out Pitch Fit and Lemoy in the description below. Two different ways to have your work featured on the channel, and we just did the last Pitch Fit of the year on Sunday. Yesterday. So check that out if you're interested in having your book featured here. And I might be starting a new program in the new year that includes, if you're an indie author and you would like the first chapter of your novel read on this channel to then direct people to your book kind of as a first introduction, I think that might be a really fun program to just, do. I can practice my reading, and more books can get out there and find readers in an easy to find channel direction way. I don't know. Let me know what your thoughts are on something like that down in the comments below. And number two, if you enjoy what I do on this channel and you would like to see me grow, please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more so that I can do more. It would be a good time. Now, onto the book. I found this through social media, minds.com specifically, back in April when it was released. I didn't know anything about the book, didn't know anything about the author, but I was like, hey, let's go ahead and add this to the reading list. I think I was reading Low End Kid at the time, and so I was like, why not just throw another cyberpunk on there, because need to try some more representations and find some more stuff. Then that someday of I'm gonna read this turned into the Loin Stream read, and now a handful of us have experienced New Tokyo. So let's talk about the book. As always, if you're interested in this book and the ideas of this book and experiencing it for yourself, I highly recommend that you purchase it and read it for yourself. Leave a review if you feel so moved, and come back and chat with me in the comments about your experience with it. So the whole point of these videos is to talk about the books that we read, to talk about the responses to the books, and to talk about what other people think, because we can all get different interpretations on the same exact content, and that is what makes book reviews and book talks and book groups in general so fun. So with that said, let's go ahead and get into the synopsis. This is gonna be kind of a long one, so in writing this morning, I appreciated going through the details again after 7 weeks of going through this book, because it refreshed some ideas, especially after having made it to the end of the book and returning to the top with knowing how the book played out. So if you went through the Loin Stream and experienced this book, maybe the process will be interesting to you as well. So enter Jacob Rayburn, a cop who was forced into retirement 7 months ago after shooting an Arabic kid while on the job. He lives in Old Tokyo, which is basically the slums that exist beneath something someone created called New Tokyo, which is overhead. He's had a hard time getting another job because of obvious reasons, but the novel still opens with him being at an interview for Securion, a security company. He's got this interview because the interviewer is an old member of the force and a friend of his. Well, Jacob doesn't get the job and is instead asked about the reason that he was dismissed from his old job before he was let out. If you're wanting more information about the shooting of the Arabic kid, hold on. It never actually comes. You just get this vague reference to it and no details surrounding any of it at all later. At the very least, it would have been really interesting to see if any of the Arabic characters that come into this story realized who Jacob was and what he did and had any animosity towards him at all. But no one actually knows anything about this other than these two, and then some of the cops that recognize him and go, oh, hey, aren't you that guy? But nobody else in the story who actually matters that could have changed anything recognize him for who he is or what he did. So Jacob also enlightens us about his fear of elevators when the man's interviewing him and invites him up to go and see New Tokyo. But Jacob absolutely hates elevators, is actually very terrified of them, so he refuses to go up. Then the interviewer and Jacob talk about the UN-1 building and how amazing it is. It's one of a kind. Overall, Chapter 1 reads like an exposition dump through dialogue for world building, with a lot of tangents and asides to talk about different world aspects, using kind of a hey, did you know, Bob sort of effect. The interviewer wishes that he and Jacob could work together again because, it's good old times and just good old buddies that used to work on the force together, but also he's dealing with some PTSD from that job, and the psych's not really helping him forget some of those mental images of the crazy stuff that happened to a female that he had been on the job with or had been involved in a previous job. Then the two of them talk about the terrorist bombings in Japan and how they've slowed down. The interviewer is like, the Prime Minister is working super hard with those Arabs in the Peace and Reconciliation Committees. There are things Things are looking great, man, though Jacob isn't so certain about that, and he believes that as long as there are terrorists in Japan, then they'll have to accept terrorism as part of society and just life. The two of them talk about a possibility of a Securion and Digitech merger, which is just two big companies coming together, and this leads into why Jacob's ultimately not going to get the job. An Arab man is on the board of, I assume, Securion, and knows of Jacob and the incident with the Arabic kid getting shot. And the interviewer says, he's got it out for you. Yeah, so that's the end of that. Instead, the interviewer tells Jacob that he could always sell his car if he was really that desperate for money. And also, they talk about the new brain/nanotechnology that's coming out soon. And then the guy suggests that Jacob reapply for a job in this business next year after the merger. However, as Jacob leaves, the interviewer says that he might know a guy who can give him a job at Digitel, another big company, but that job would just be as a parking garage security at the lowest pay level available. And Jacob is like, you know, as poor as I am, I'm too good for that. So, no. In the next section, Jacob just moves through the UN-1 building, which feels like it's just there to show commercials and flogging of technology in the military state and a mixture of all of the multiculturalism of society in this book. But I don't think any other place in this book feels like the time spent in the UN building, where it's just security and different races constantly being pointed out and news networks talking about terrorism. The phrase peacekeeper comes up here, but it's never used again later in the future. So this feels like an attempt at world building that never actually comes in to have any value in the rest of the story. I actually forgot that the word peacekeeper was used until I went back to do the synopsis. Much of the news broadcasting talks about the alliance against Islamic terrorism and the basic relationship of Japan with the Arabic people living there. That is, it's generally not good, and there's not much of a good opinion between the Arabic people and everyone else. Jacob talks to a UN security member at that point, and the guy asks who Jacob is. Jacob explains himself. The dude Googles Jacob and finds all of these articles about him, and then asks Jacob if he's ever Googled himself, not in a dirty way. Only for Jacob to say no, he doesn't search up stuff like that, and he doesn't listen to any of the news media outlets because it's all propaganda. Obviously, the UN security guy is like, bro, you really need to not be saying that out loud because you're in the UN Masters building, okay? You got some balls to be talking like that. Then Jacob leaves. Outside, he's got a message from the interviewer from the inside who says he might have a lead on a job, a private job, a secret job, and just wait for a call. You'll get it. He passed your information along to somebody who might be able to help you. Jacob's then leaving the UN building when he's approached by some random activist on the street that says Jacob should just run for office. The activist recognizes Jacob and knows that Jacob understands the importance of Japanese culture. His political party supports traditional Japanese culture and values and wants Japan to be Japanese again. Jacob is like, I'm not interested in politics, thanks, and walks off. The rando is like, think about it though, okay? And this specific thread never comes back, so I don't really know why it was here. It threw all of us off when we were reading this book, and I would say it's fortunate that it never came back because I didn't want any shoehorning of politics in my fiction, but then that just made it more jarring because it never had any relevance to the rest of the book. So why was it there? Jacob is then driving around lamenting on life, the loss of his child, watching other families be in Japan, and he's all alone. He sees his rent deferment period is over, and he's going to need some money fast, so this is going to add pressure to him for needing to pick up a random job when it comes in. But apparently not that low-paying security job, which he could have had, but he's too good for, even though he's got no rent money. Jacob then calls his friend Hakeem to update him on how the interview went and how screwed he is. Hakeem eventually invites Jacob out for dinner and karaoke with their girlfriends to hopefully lighten the mood, and it was also supposed to be kind of a celebration of Jacob getting a job, but without Jacob having gotten a job, they're just going to lament. But then Jacob mentions maybe a side job might come in, and so Hakeem is like, hey, then I guess we can still party and celebrate that you might possibly have a job, so come on out. So during this conversation, there was this bizarre interaction where Jacob's like, bro, I don't know if I want to come out. I don't want to be an extra. And Hakeem is like, bro, you're not. That's why I invited a Jen. You know how touchy she gets when she gets drunk? And Jacob is like, yeah, I know. And Hakeem is like, I had to help you put her shirt back on the last time, remember? And Jacob's like, please don't remind me. And Hakeem is like, I got a picture of it somewhere around here. Jacob tells him to delete it, and Hakeem is like, I will delete the picture on one condition. You come to karaoke tonight. So that whole interaction exchange is just bizarre. Also, it's at this point where Jacob and Jen don't seem like they're dating, but later in the novel, Jen's outright says that they had been dating, and Jacob changed his phone number to avoid her without ever breaking up with her. How is it that Hakeem, who seems like his best friend, didn't know that Jacob dumped Jen or wasn't talking to Jen, and he invited her into this karaoke thing? Not only that, but how did Jacob not bring it up that he did not want to see Jen because he kind of broke up with Jen and was avoiding her? Again, this feels like a lost thread that changed at some point as the author wrote forward, but he didn't go back and revise this scene with the relationship as it had shifted in mind. Meanwhile, Hakeem introduces that he has a new girlfriend named Caroline, and she is Portuguese. Anyway, the party is agreed to, and Jacob's going to come to karaoke. Meanwhile, Jacob gets more bad news that he needs money desperately. So Jacob is driving and gets into a streetcar race and is swearing at random people. He gets pulled over by the cops for going too fast, but gets out of it because he's a retired cop and they all respect him, even though he was discharged. And then Jacob tells Jennifer that he's going to pick her up for karaoke soon. Dress nice. Jacob wakes up and he has no idea where he is. He's also late for karaoke. Then an old coworker of his, Lieutenant Lorraine, calls him up and says that he's got a job that might also lead to the person who killed Jacob's ex-partner, Sho. Now, this is an under-the-table job that the department can't acknowledge, which is why Jacob is perfect for it, because he doesn't work for the department, but he has all of the training, so he can sneak around and do the stuff he needs to do without it being put on the books. Now, the job is, he needs to go after a high-ranking Islamic cult leader named Mustafa, and Jacob's not sure that he's down for an assassination job, but Lorraine uses both Jake's need for money and revenge as leverage to convince him to do the work. Also, he's gonna get like all of the best level 4 weapons that you can freaking imagine, so clearly Jacob takes the job. Lorraine says that Jacob will get the info that he needs in due time via text mail. So with all that said, now he's off to do karaoke, and no thinking about how or why he was somewhere he has no recollection of being or where he was. While hanging out with Jennifer, Caroline, and Hakeem, they're all getting drunk. Jacob goes off to smoke in angst, and then Jennifer comes over and asks him about stuff, about his life. You know, he should just talk to her, and he's like, I can't tell you. Everything is top secret, and you don't need to know. And she's like, please, Jakey, please just tell me. I want to be your friend, your girlfriend, your confidant. Talk to me. And he's like, no, I'm not talking to you. And so then Jen gets mad and says, fuck you, and then walks off. And since Jen is mad at him, but really it's because Jacob doesn't really care about her, he's going to go to the red light district to his favorite prostitute because, yes, he does have a favorite prostitute, and he's been seeing her behind Jen's back the entire time, and he's in love with her, and her name is Kitsune. At the Love Hotel/bar/club, Jacob waits around drinking until Kitsune arrives. Just for the record, Kitsune is Chinese. It should be noted that almost everyone in this book is, in fact, not Japanese. Jacob's only a quarter Japanese, while he's also 3/4 Caucasian. The notable Japanese characters in this book are an old Japanese technician that you see later, Nagai, the villain, the villain's robotic henchman, hot and oily, and then a handful of side characters who don't appear more than once or for more than a second. There are more critical Arab characters than any other race in this book, feeding the feeling that this isn't Japan. Anyway, Jacob has sex with Kitsune. Also, her batteries are running low because she has not very good tech. She's not a sex robot. She's just got a digicore in her head, which is basically a computer thing, and it saved her life when she was dying one time, but it's janky because she got it from a criminal when she was in a desperate situation, so they gave her trash. Jacob's in love with this woman, but hasn't said so because she's a prostitute and boundaries are necessary, which is also the reason why he has never kissed Kitsune on the lips. That'll change at the end of the book because there's a bunch of meaning behind kissing somebody, and that's how this goes. This is like the second book I'm reading right now where it's like, kiss it, no. The other one says kisses don't matter. This one says kisses do matter. And kisses are too intimate, which is why Jacob never kissed the prostitute. Yeah. So after they spend some time together, Kitsune's asking Jake about his new job, and Jake's like, Kitsune, I can't tell you. It's dangerous. It's secret. It's not for your virgin eyes. And Kitsune is hurt because, bruh, you should trust her a little bit more. She wants to be trusted. She wants to be a part of your life. And she's really trying to get him to say that he trusts her. And then he says, okay, I do trust you. And she says, okay, then if you trust me, tell me all your secrets. And this is where she felt like a spy. Because she was pushing so hard in a very obvious way. But her guilting doesn't really work, though Jake does feel bad. He then talks about wanting to upgrade Kitsune's parts so that she's not in such a bad situation where she might die if she doesn't recharge her brain in time. But that's the end of that. Then Jacob leaves, grabs a coffee, and thinks about his impending mission against Mustafa. It's coming, man. Jacob waits around his apartment, watching the news and smoking until he gets info from Lorraine about what he should be doing. The television news includes more anti-Japanese rhetoric by Islamicists and bounties on Islamic terrorists. He goes onto the roof of his building to smoke, and that's where he meets Lorraine, getting more information about his mission as well as being given all of the level 4 gear and dangerous weapons that he could have ever wanted and never got to use when he was actually on the force. Also, Jacob ends up getting a yellow version of the same oldies manual gas car that he has, a Blitzer. Clearly, since Jacob's being sent on a top-secret mission involving Arabic people, his first impulse is to go to his best friend Hakim, who is Arabic, and beg him to help infiltrate this situation because he's one of them. Visually. When he goes, you're one of them. He's not calling Hakim, his best friend, a terrorist. Is he? Jacob makes a lot of questionable decisions. He bribes Hakim with some money. Spoiler alert for Hakim, no amount of money was worth what Jacob was about to put you through. But Hakim eventually agrees, thinking I guess the job really couldn't be that bad because Jacob wouldn't do that to me, right? Also, spoiler alert, when you get body armor in the storyline, you should probably be concerned. At least a little bit. Yeah. Jacob picks Hakim up in his car, and the two fanboy over how rad it is because it's a real car, not like those gross electric cars and automatics. Ew. Those don't even count as driving. Like, for real, for real. The two of them then head to the Arabic suburb of Shibuya to go and meet Mustafa at his building and maybe take him out, ice him like he needs to die. They're pulled over by the cops when Jacob again tries to race with his bright yellow gas-guzzling car, but this time he's got a fake ID for his job. But he's still fine. He walks away just fine. They don't really question him all that much. And as they reach Shibuya, this is when Hakim starts to realize how serious this job might actually be and that his life might actually be in danger and that he is not ready to try and assassinate somebody. He is just a normal guy with a cat and a girlfriend, like a bootylicious girlfriend that he wants to return to. And he's also not the main character of the story, so he is probably going to die. Jacob, let me go home. That's pretty much the internal monologue. What I assume would be the internal monologue of Hakim at this exact moment. Now, no matter how many times Hakim says, hey, I'm not trained for this, I'm not a cop, I can't do this, this is your gig, not mine, please, Jacob, just let me go. Jacob convinces Hakim to keep going, to stay there with him. This might just be because Hakim doesn't have a way to get back home since Jacob drove them, but still. Jacob convinces Hakim to stay, and while approaching Mustafa's building, they walk past a pharmacy/salon/skincare type deal where this man is offering free Vit D injections and spouting about how these new injections are coming out soon to be more effective for giving people vitamin D since they live underneath New Tokyo, and they don't get any direct sunlight, so this is a supplement for that lack of sunlight. Hakim takes the injection, and he is super stoked about it, but Jacob is like, fuck off, I don't trust any of this. And also, you're like an Arabic salesman. That's pretty much the whole vibe of that moment. Again, this is a plotline that will pretty much never come back, though it is used as the main device for the main bad guy, who is barely even mentioned at all, ever again, beyond his evil monologuing. So, anyway, they arrive at the location of Mustafa's office. The two of them go in acting like they have an appointment with Mustafa about the drugs, like they're partners in the business, and Mustafa warns them that the Arabs are less keen to take the vitamin D injections. They aren't so keen on taking, putting things in their bodies that are from corporations, but they're more okay with taking drugs. And Jacob doesn't seem to know what Mustafa's talking about, so then Mustafa's like, who in the frick are you? Jacob accuses Mustafa of killing his partner Sho, and the two of them realize, oh dear, we have been played, and neither of us is who we thought the other one was. The security guards that were supposed to belong to Mustafa apparently are also there to kill him. Why they didn't just do it until that moment, I'm not entirely sure, other than maybe they were trying to pin the murder on Jacob. Mustafa gives Jacob info on a secret passageway out of the building while the henchmen are trying to break down the door. Hakim gets shot. Jacob makes it out of there in time just before the place explodes. All the while, Hakim he didn't want to do this. He didn't want to be there. He knew that he was going to die. Probably the only smart character in this, but actually Fari is probably pretty smart. So Jacob flees the scene and Shibuya altogether and retires to a Regenopod in order to heal quickly. Regenopods are just like little pools of water that you can lay in, and it speeds your healing process. In the meantime, we learn that Hakim didn't actually die in the explosion, but was not entirely knocked out either during the fight, so he was able to escape the building just before it exploded. Somehow, Hakim finds exactly the building and Regenopod that Jacob is in. I guess he probably recognized that bright yellow blitzer that nobody else has sitting in a parking lot somewhere, and he was like, that's my guy. Hakim comes in and he's like, bro, I almost just died in that building that just blew up. We were just in there. And Jacob's only response is like, dude, calm down. Are you high? There was no explosive building. What are you talking about? It turns out that Jacob doesn't remember anything that just went on with Mustafa, and it might have something to do with his Digicore. Since the Digicore is acting sketchy, they need a little bit of off-brand help. And fortunately for Jacob, Hakim knows just the guy. His name is Okada, and he is known for under-the-table work on Digicores. Okada goes through Jacob's Digicore and enables his memory, then exposing to him that his Digicore was modified. Dun dun dun. Jacob determines that he can't go back to his old life now, so he only has one option. He is to move forward with a new one. And now he needs to figure out who is messing with his Digitech and who is following him and who is messing up his life. Hakim and Jacob stake out Jacob's place to see if any of those bad guys show up. None do, making Jacob look mildly delusional. Then they determine to take their important electronics like their cell pads, their car, and the Digicores to Hakim's other hacker friend, Fari. At first, Jacob's like, no, because Fari's apparently an accused terrorist, but then goes along with it because he wants the help, and it definitely lets Fari hack into all of his electronics to set up fake accounts and make him virtually disappear from the national network. Jacob finds out that he's been tracked, probably by the government and military, since they're the only ones that track people, but Jacob can't imagine why. However, at least his cars weren't being tracked, just the chip in his head that literally goes everywhere with him. Some tension arises from Fari referring to the Japanese government as your government because he doesn't see any Arabs among the government or the officials or the police apparatus. Meanwhile, Jacob's now deciding it's time to track down whoever is hunting him because he doesn't like to be a sitting duck and he is not afraid, and he will show them that he is not afraid by coming right to them. He's gonna find you, you brain trackers. Hakim doesn't want to do this anymore. He already almost died. He peed himself. He says he peed himself like 4 times just to hope that Jacob gets the point of how scared he is and how unprepared he is for any of this. But Jacob is like, bro, please. You're being ridiculous if you don't want to go on this mission. Is this not the coolest thing ever? Plus, it doesn't really matter that you're untrained. Go with the flow. Like, I'm going to give you a gun, and then you can figure it out as you go, bro. Like, what are you, a pansy? And Jacob keeps bothering Hakim to help him, in part because he's like, look, we're dealing with your people, okay, Hakim? I need you to help me because we're dealing with your people, aren't we? So help me, please, because the people causing problems are yours. I don't know why Hakim decided to stick around with Jacob, continually implying that all Arabs are the same, and because you're Arabic, you know all of the other Arabs, and because you're Arabic, like, the terrorist bombings are also your fault by association of your ethnicity. I'd just be like, Jacob, fuck off. Hakim is a better person than me, okay? That aside, Jacob is the absolute worst. I don't know why Hakim has anything to do with him. It's Jacob who was hired for this job, and it's Jacob who is bothered that he is being mentally tracked by some government entity or some bad guys, and now it is apparently Hakim's problem because I don't know. Also, the irony of calling America a crime-infested shithole constantly when it appears Japan has become a terrorist attack capital of the world. Maybe that irony was done on purpose, so I'll at least give this book that. Anyway, after talking things through with Fari, they're pretty sure that one of the big baddies frequents a specific love hotel slash prostitute area in the red light district, so maybe they can go there and get some info from one of the prostitutes that has seen him around. Hakeem and Jacob strap up with the obvious gear, body armor. Again, Hakeem, if you're putting on body armor, bad things are probably coming your way. So they strap up and go to the bar / prostitute area, strip club, whatever, and they wait for Kitsune to show up so they can commandeer her and ask her if she knows the person that they're looking for. In a private room, Jacob fills Kitsune in on everything and shows her a picture of a tall, oily, and hot, pure-blooded Japanese man who had been in Mustafa's place and tried to murder all of them. Apparently, another sex club in Kabukicho was mentioned, and he's looking for information on this. Apparently, another strip club / sex club was mentioned in Kabukicho, and that's where Jacob is going to go to look for more information. That's also apparently an Arabic sex club, and Kitsune knows a woman there named Kareen. Jacob and Hakeem make this their next destination. Without any subtlety at all, Jacob and Kareen then start talking to people at the Muslim bar, the Muslim sex bar, and showing people pictures of the hot and oily purebred that they're looking for. A man named Zain Mahmoud offers to help them, saying that he knows that guy. He takes Hakeem and Jacob to a private room in the back where they're going to talk to him, and Hakeem is just like, dude, I've got a bad feeling about this. I don't think that we should be here. I don't think that we should be doing this. I don't want to be doing this. Can I please go home? And apparently Jacob's got no survival or cop instincts at all, and he's just like, calm down, Hakeem, you're being ridiculous. Everything is fine. The plan is to make it to the private room where they will ambush the man helping them and extract information by force from the guy's digicore. All while Hakeem is nervous and saying we shouldn't do this, Jacob is a total psycho, being like, shut up, get with the program, Hakeem, we're already here. Jacob knocks the guy out when they get to the private room and starts pulling the info that he wants from the digicore. It turns out that he also triggered a Cortex bomb, which basically lobotomized the guy digitally. So, thanks for that, Jacob. He doesn't feel bad, it's fine. It's only after this and an alarm going off that Jacob's like, maybe Hakeem is right, and none of this is worth the trouble of what we're doing right now. The two of them run out of the strip club / salon before the hosts can get back to see the guy that Jacob killed and them hanging over the body. The two of them return to Kitsune at the other club, and Kitsune provides Jacob with a direct conversation that she had with some man that they are looking for. Well, she says she's going to provide them with information. He's just got to plug into her digicore in her head so that she can upload it to his. Well, it turns out that when Jacob connects to Kitsune's brain, she actually paralyzes him. The big, oily, muscle-hottie, pure-blooded man walks in, murders Hakeem, and then takes Jacob and Kitsune to a secret, evil lair location. It's at this point in the novel when we get a backflash in Jacob's dreams while he's unconscious. When he wakes up, he's bound to a table, and the bad guy Nagai uses this point to go on a chapter-long rant about all of his evil plans to change the Vit D supplements to kill anyone and everyone who isn't Japanese, but also up to 4.37% of Japanese people as well, because he's not being that specific with his bioterrorism, and it's okay to sacrifice a couple of actual Japanese people if it takes out all of the non-Japanese people that he doesn't want in his country anymore. Legit, this entire section is just Nagai monologuing for no reason whatsoever while Jacob is tied to a table, and he is explaining everything, why he loses his memory, why he's going to kill people, how he's going to kill everybody. For no reason. He doesn't even erase Jacob's brain. He doesn't intend to use Jacob any further. He's just monologuing at him. Okay, and if I'm honest, there is a reason for doing this, and it's because none of this plot made it into the actual actions or discoveries of the book, so the readers had to be told it somehow, which translated into the bad guy just monologuing it extensively at the main character. It turns out also that Kitsune was under the mind control of someone when she was paralyzing Jacob. I don't know. Apparently, the control that Jacob went under when it went after Mustafa was also Nagai controlling Jacob. Was the same control that Nagai used on Kitsune to take out Jacob. There's never any explanation as to who or how or why there's this brain control going on, and it just kind of drops off the face of the earth after this moment. Anyway, after this, Nagai leaves, and there's a showdown between Jacob and the hot and oily pure-blooded Japanese man. Neither die, though the Japanese man is disabled long enough for Jacob to escape with Kitsune in his arms. Kitsune is barely alive as her Digicore batteries almost died, and she was also shot during the showdown, and if her Digicore dies, she's going to die, but she's got some bullet holes in her too, so that's also a risk. She needs tech support and physical support. Jacob realizes that he can't take Kitsune to the hospital because since she's been shot, if she was seen by a legitimate hospital, they'd have to call the police to report the gun wound. So instead, he decides that the best thing to do with Kitsune is to take her to his ex-girlfriend, Jennifer. Because despite having never actually broken up with her and just changing his phone number, she will definitely nurse a wounded prostitute back to health. The wounded prostitute girlfriend of her ex-boyfriend back to health. At her house, there's all of this animosity because Jennifer is still thirsty for Jacob despite how she was treated and is continuously throwing herself at him while calling Kitsune a whore, and Kitsune is kind of over there dying, but Jennifer is like, we should bang. Look, I know that she's over there. I've dealt with her, but like we should bang. And if she dies in like 15 minutes anyway, like at least we had a good time. Right? That's pretty much what the whole scene is. You might be wondering why Jacob brought Kitsune here, and it's apparently because Jennifer has some level of medical knowledge, and this was the best decision that he could figure out how to make. Jacob then brings the tech hacker Okada over to remove Nagai's mind control software from Kitsune and then to mildly upgrade her gear so that she doesn't straight up die, I think. Though Okada's like, bro, you really need to take her to the hospital because she's going to die. She is in very critical physical condition. Though Jen is still aggressive, by the end of this scene, she doesn't hate Kitsune anymore because she sees how much Jacob loves her, but she would be interested in a threesome because Jacob is bae. Against his desires, Jacob takes Kitsune to the hospital because he can't let her die. However, while he's there, he's attacked by some cops and has to race/sneak out with some gun battling going on. He then takes Kitsune to a Regenipod place for her to heal very quickly for a while. Here, they're also eventually accosted by cops and have to sneak out again, though in each location, Lorraine appears and tries to help Jacob without screwing over his own life, looking like the accomplice to a criminal. At this point, Jacob doesn't know where to go anymore. The cops hate him, the terrorists hate him, so he returns to Fari's place, telling him that Hakim is dead and he needs help, and everyone who is non-Japanese is going to die, including himself, because he's only a quarter and that's not enough to save him from the drugs that he doesn't actually have to take. Fari's got an idea on how to take all of this down, but Jacob doesn't want to do it the terrorist way. He wants to be better than that, so instead, he wants to do it a better way. He wants to assassinate somebody in one blow. Just that one guy. Or two guys. However many are necessary. So here he goes to meet a Korean prostitute he knows who is in contact with the bad guy he wants to assassinate. He pays her off to try and meet with her client and then toss this little chip onto his Digicore that he could then use to scramble the brain of that guy. Kind of like he lobotomized the other guy earlier. You just throw this onto the Digicore, it would magnet onto their head, and then he could push a button and it would just scramble their brain. That was the plan. Jacob sends her to the bad guy's house, and well, wouldn't you have it, her walking straight up there. They're sus. The guards are sus. She's not let in to see her client, but she's beat up, stripped. Her teeth are knocked out, and then she is hauled away by the cops. Jacob is so thoughtful that he runs for his life, abandoning this woman that he just met and got into this situation. Enter into a massive car chase scene where Jacob kills at least 10 police officers, if not more than that. I have a hard time reconciling that this started with his desire to avenge his murdered partner's show, and now he's killing all of these other cops without even blinking. Jacob is the bad guy here. Like, no joke. He returns to Fari then to beg for help, resigning himself to doing things Fari's way. Fari is absolutely delighted by this, and also reminds him of the terrorist code. That is, you don't get to ask questions, you don't get to know pretty much anything. All you get to know is where your orders tell you to go. You don't get to know why, you don't get to know what you're doing, you just do it. So Faria injects Jacob's head with these thoughts, memories, and practices of one of the employees at the Digitech corporate building, as well as the virus code that he once inserted into that building. The goal here is that Jacob will go in pretending that he is someone else, including with a hand and face mask to complete the look, and he will inject that top secret encrypted code into the mega computer and then yeet himself out of there. He's told not to slow down when he's leaving not only the building, but also Old Tokyo. They've set him up with this new identity and a way out of Japan once he has finished the deal. So all he's got to do is finish his part of the agreement and then get to the meeting location with the other terrorists that will take him out of Japan. And he's like, okay, that sounds great. As long as Kitsune is coming with me. Because otherwise, no deal. So, as you might guess, Jacob gets in, injects the system after a very little. Honestly, I think the biggest struggle for him was that the system was in a maintenance mode for about 2 hours. So in the middle of this terrorist espionage, he sat down, tried to read a book, was too distracted, sat down again, thought about his wife and child and the death of it all, and was pretty bored. He also had no way of communicating with anybody because he didn't have his cell pad on him and his digicore was shut off. So the terrorists didn't know that he was behind schedule, but still going to work on it. So there's all of that. After he injects the code, he gets into a bit of a gunfight, runs into Lorraine again, who lets him go. He gets outside to see the big, oily, muscle, purebred hottie again, and Nagai getting away in a random car that's suddenly there. They have a brief battle where Jacob learns that the purebred is pretty much almost totally augmented and robotic. Cops show up and surround the scene. This somehow still allows Jacob to get away, even though he was part of the battle scene standing there right next to the Japanese purebred. And now bombs have been going off everywhere in New Tokyo because apparently what Jacob did was inject a code that shut down all communications and web services and devices that allowed cops and the internet and everybody to talk to one another, and stopping everything coming in and out of Old and New Tokyo. And then the Arabs started bombing the entire city specifically to make New Tokyo collapse down onto Old Tokyo. Jacob screams about how he was used by terrorists to become a terrorist, while at the same time he never reflects on this and knew that it was going to happen the entire time. So in short, Jacob's a terrorist. He and Kitsune struggle to get out of Old Tokyo because all the ramps have been blasted. He also finally catches Faria on the phone and gets filled in on everything that is going on. And Faria's like, lol, yeah, you better get out of the city if you don't want to die. Good luck, yo. And long story short, in the finale, Jacob and Kitsune are in the yellow blitzer driving out of town as New Tokyo collapses onto Old Tokyo. Kitsune climbs onto Jacob's lap and says, "Shift me like you do your gears of your car, baby." She also kisses him, says, "I love you." He says, "I know." And the story ends with, "The sun has never shone brighter," in all caps. This is where we are. The end. So, if you joined us for the reading of this book, was there anything that you forgot happened? That it's like, oh yeah, that did happen. And if this was your first time, I'm looking forward to your thoughts on this book review. And also if you decide to go and read the book to catch kind of an idea of what's going on for yourself. Now to get into my thoughts, the author's action scenes were actually very well paced. The descriptions in the action scenes were super easy to follow and set at a good speed. They didn't generally feel too long or too vague, which can often be a struggle with writing action scenes, and they can easily become confusing, overbearing, repetitive, but the author did action scenes in this book very, very well. Also, the author's dialogue was generally pretty good, setting aside the "I love you, I know" at the end, which just feels like an overdramatic cop movie. But the dialogue in general was fairly good, natural, and the character voices were unique. And very specifically, Hakim was the most likable character in this book. And then you go and do him dirty by getting him murdered when all he wanted to do was go home to sweet Carolina. Bro, Hakim was a simple, simple man. And always the best to you. And you do him dirty like this, I still can't believe it. I can't believe you do this to Hakim. Plot twist, freaking Jacob actually killed Sho and is just blaming everybody else when he straight up murdered Sho. I would not be surprised. Moving on to the world building, the number one thing that stood out to me with this book is that there was no world building toward how or why Japan became a multicultural center of anything. Japan is an island, they're very nationalistic, and generally they have a fairly large leaning toward Japanese culture, tradition, and homogeneity. Maybe I'm speaking just out of ignorance here, but everything that I've heard says it's hard for foreigners to move to Japan, to live in Japan, and immigrate to Japan full time. So with all, like, it's even hard to rent apartments as a non-Japanese person, as far as I've heard. So with all these central characters of this book not being Japanese, I needed more information as to how and why Japan deteriorated into this futuristic ghetto where one city was built on top of the other and all of the massive waves of unrepresented immigrants and poor people lived on the bottom side of New Tokyo. None of this was ever explained, it just existed as it did, which left this feeling not like Japan in any way at all. And maybe that was the point, but I still needed the world building to help me understand how this world came to be, and then the resentment and anger between the different warring groups of people. What it felt like happened was that this book took the general idea of cyberpunk and leaned on readers already being familiar with what cyberpunk looked like or felt like, or the tropes. Then it inserted a couple of random scenes for setting, like the military complex in the beginning, and random commercials plastered all over the place for some level of consumerism to be put into the characters' heads. Yet these elements didn't continue throughout. They were just at the beginning for the scene setting, and they had nothing to do with the overall plot of the book. This made the references of cyberpunk then feel much more like a vague reference where you're expected to put the dressing on for yourself and then just accept that the brain chips alone make this cyberpunk. Additionally, as part of the multiculti world building, you had all of these different ethnicity characters speaking different languages, and it was again never explained why. A Mexican was in Japan speaking Spanish, Hakim had a Portuguese girlfriend, the prostitutes that we met and were given names were Chinese and Korean, speaking their respective languages, and Arabic were all in these different places. One of these common elements in cyberpunk is multiculturalism, but you need to make it cohesive and make it make sense. And this just didn't do that. It actually reminded me of The Low-End Kid by Robert Crone, wherein everyone was just a different ethnicity for what felt like arbitrary reasons. You know, the leading female character was a French woman, there was a random Russian, some Croatians. Everybody in that book was just a different ethnicity with different accents, so that you knew that they were different ethnicities, without ever actually having explained why or where or how these people came from different places in a futuristic world that would likely have different countries and layouts than what we know today. Moving on to the antagonist, somehow this feels right to follow with, and that's the question. Who is the antagonist? Generally, in cyberpunk, the antagonist is corporate state, a kind of fascism, if you will, where big corporations control everything and consumerism is turned up to 2000%. In futuristic dystopians, you'll have the government as the main issue. Here, I don't really know who the main problem is. You have the introduction of the UN-1, which has the multiculturalism issue and the nationalism issue. That seems to be leading push for mass immigration. You have the VIT-D and the big corporations with their genocidal medicines and the lack of trust for the big corporations. You have the cops with their underhanded plot. You have the Arabs with their terrorism. There is so much going on in here, and it feels much more like the flavor of the chapter rather than subplots building on each other for something complex where they're all responding to each other in this world of animosity. Ultimately, I'm reading this as Jacob is the antagonist. His wife killing herself and her child was the first thing that set him off into becoming kind of crazy and delusional and attached. Then his partner being killed set him off, and then killing that kid and losing his job threw him in the deep end of the delusional state, influenced by how much he felt betrayed and the resentment he had for everyone else, including his mother's death. These terrorists killed his mother. These terrorists were showing up everywhere. He made mental enemies out of everyone when real bad things were happening, and he just accepted the destruction to give him the life he wanted, which was Kitsune. I'd even say that he was happy Hakim died because he had something against Arabs as a whole, and he blamed the Arabic kid that he killed for his losing his job, and he did keep saying to Hakim, these are your people, so this is your problem. So to some extent, I think that Jacob blamed Hakim as part of all of this other stuff he had a problem with, which really just makes Jacob even more despicable. And that's just my take on this. For anybody else that read this book, I would love to hear your thoughts on it. Finally, Nagai is the only person that I can assume is supposed to be a villain, beyond obviously the terrorism of Fari and the Arabs that bombed New Tokyo. This is because Nagai wants to kill a fraction of the population of Japan. However, as far as villains go, he doesn't come in until after 50% of the way through the book, so he's got really no standing. He's not really mentioned that much to like build up his figure so that we're worried about him or his ideas up until he enters. And then he just monologues, disappears, and doesn't come back until 96%. And he is driving away from a corporate building that was closed anyway because it was nighttime and Jacob snuck in. But somehow, for some reason, Nagai was there just to do a howdy doody, I still exist, and then drive off. He also had that brain control technology, and that was never resolved or used and could have been much more involved than it was, especially in this takeover plot. However, the mind control technology was only opportunistically used with Jacob and Kitsune in one spot each, and then never used again, and easily removed from their technology, never to resurface or re-implement itself, and was never actually a fight. Honestly, Nagai and the whole genocidal drug thing feel more like a delusion on Jacob's mind because he's pissed off about life and how things have gone, and he's projecting all of the bad stuff to justify the terrorism that he wants in the end. Because he also does not hide how much he hates living in old Tokyo, being underneath the sun, not being able to see the rain, and so I would not doubt if he deluded himself to agree with these terrorists to destroy the new that he doesn't want to be a part of. Going on to loose ends, there are a lot of them in this book. So the mind control is one of those loose ends. It needed development, it needed to be used more, it needed to be struggled with and explained, and how Nagai was the only person doing this with this ability, I don't really know. And then we've got the job that Lorraine brought Jacob, having to do with Sho's murder. We never get any closer to that. We never learn how Sho died, where he died, if it was on the job, if it was not on the job, and if this was just a manipulation tactic to get Jacob on board with the assassination of Mustafa, then what was Lorraine's goal all along? Because Lorraine kept running into Jacob in all of these other locations and letting him, and I still don't see why they hired him in the first place when he was on their side. The whole business between Sho and Lorraine felt unfinished to me, and maybe a plot point the author initially intended to use but got away from eventually as he moved forward, and never tied it back into the story or tied it out of the story when it was done. There was also human testing and humans in legitimate test tubes, which were brought in at 93% for no reason other than to have something to point at for Lorraine and say, look, I'm not the bad guy, they're doing human testing here. Literally had no other effect on this plot. Jacob's fear of elevators felt overblown. I get having PTSD when a bomb goes off when you're in an elevator and shrapnel basically cuts your mom in half and you're like 6 years old, but the way he treated elevators felt so much worse than it actually was when he conquered that fear. And in writing the synopsis, I was also brought back to how it was presented. Like, if you didn't get on an elevator, then you couldn't go to New Tokyo and you were stuck underground. So that's why he had never been to New Tokyo, and he admits that he'd never been to New Tokyo at the beginning of this book. Yet later on, we learn that there are ramps to the surface. So the consequences of never getting on an elevator don't actually exist. And his fear of elevators then looks overplayed and ultimately doesn't affect anything. Like, maybe if he had to get on an elevator to get out of the crumbling old Tokyo as New Tokyo falls down, maybe it would make sense, because then you've got this strong effect on him and him having to conquer it for a plot-related reason, but there was literally nothing in this book that was affected by him being afraid of elevators and how intense that fear was until it was conquered. In Chapter 2, there was that random political activist talking about running for a political position and make Japan great again. This never came back and felt more like making a contemporary political talking point to appeal to modern politics as a selling point, rather than writing something into the story that makes sense. Or it's another old thread that didn't get written out when that's not the direction the story went in. Also, there was this constant mention of a Bible verse that never really played any part in the story, and it just felt like something that was... a part of it was missing. A part of the reference was missing. Maybe something was taken out during revision. Maybe it, again, just didn't get tied in. I don't know, but I didn't see the point of constantly bringing up this Bible verse because it really didn't affect the story or the characters in any meaningful way. Finally, there were people all over the place having random coughing fits that were getting progressively worse, and it was notated in the text that they were just having these coughing fits at random times. This felt like a plot-related item, maybe with the Vit D and the death medicine, but again, it was never addressed, nobody died, it was not talked about, and people just coughed. and then it went away. It feels appropriate with the poisoned pharmaceuticals, but nothing happens on this front, and we never see the effects of what Nagai was doing come into play. We just hear about it from Nagai, and I think Jacob complains about it once or twice. And maybe it's that the author didn't have enough time to touch on everything that he wanted or that he introduced in this book, but there's just so much of it that got left out or forgotten that was planted here. All of this just leans towards this feeling that the author might be a pantser, and let the story guide him where he wanted to go, but then he never went back to revise the old stuff that didn't quite fit anymore because it's kind of hard and a lot of people don't like to do the whole revision stuff, and I know it's rough. This is no shame on pantsers. I use first drafts to really feel out where a story is going and who the characters are and what it is I'm doing, and that's why I rewrite the whole thing once or twice once I'm done, or more if I really need to push out the bits that don't really work anymore. And let me tell you, looking at Bodymore 2, there's a lot of stuff in there that has changed. I am in the middle of the revision 2, and I'm only in the first act, like the first 6 chapters, and at least half of the first 6 chapters have completely changed from even the first revision, and I'm in a second revision, so things are still very massively changing. So yeah, it is a lot of work, but this also is why I feel like I'm looking at old plot ideas that were just never worked out. That's the best explanation that I have for this. Moving on to the main character, Jacob has no redeeming qualities. He was an ass the whole time, an angsty ass sometimes, and got everyone around him assaulted or killed without blinking an eye. Random prostitute, a tool for his plan. She can rot in prison with no teeth. Hakim humiliated, bullied, and then killed. The whole time he said that he wasn't prepared for this, and Jacob just ragged on him and wouldn't let him go. Jacob also shot at least 10 police officers without even pausing to think about the consequences or what exactly he was doing. And let's not forget the other cop that he had lay on the ground while he was walking away. He then threw a frag grenade at the car, and forgetting that the dude was close enough to get burned, the bomb went off and he was like, oh shit, I think I just killed that guy. Oh well. Jacob, in my opinion, is a bad guy. He is a villain-level bad guy. I don't know if that's what the intention of the author was, but I do know this. At the end of the novel, in the About the Author section, it says that Jacob is an amalgamation of the author and a fictitious character. So I'm not sure how to take this. Usually, when you've got a self-insert, the author doesn't mean to make them a villain, I think. If you do self-inserts, let me know in the comments down below what you usually aim for when you do a self-insert. But I'm really not sure how to take this. Like, I'm not really sure how to interpret this book and what it's trying to do. So I'm just straight up saying that Jacob reads as a bad guy who hated the world because everything went wrong for him and he didn't give a shit about his friends or those who helped him. Everyone was a tool. Look at Jen being a nurse for his new girlfriend. He never even apologized for changing his number on her. And that was that. Also, to be noted, every female character that came into this book wanted a piece of Jacob. I don't know, man. It seems like a fantasy, a hero fantasy of some kind, and I don't mind that kind of thing of like all the characters falling in love with the main character as long as you make it make sense within the plot. The next section is about overwriting. While the action sequences were well done, this author did have a weakness of overwriting. From small things like he thought to himself, which is unnecessary because all thoughts are to yourself, to multiple pages of heavily describing teaching someone how to drive a stick shift or going through the steps of taking a gun apart multiple times that didn't read like it had anything to do with the character beyond he knew what he was doing and he was showing off. There are a lot of sections of this that I think could have been pulled back because of overwriting. Other choices. I wasn't sure how to categorize this, but this is just other points that I noted while I was going through, and I wanted to mention them because, I don't know. This book made a point to introduce everyone's racial makeup in, like, every single interaction, and it was kind of bizarre. See the pure-blooded Caucasian on the screen. That is directly from the book. When I was saying pure-blooded Japanese man, that's because the book pointed out that that guy was a pure-blood Japanese every single time he came onto the screen, and I don't know why. I guess if the society was written to be more obsessed with race and ethnicity than it actually was, this would make sense. But this ended up feeling like a string from a previous plot idea being left behind and unchanged after the direction of the novel shifted. Between the overdramatic replaying of the elevator death and Jacob being in the middle of the novel's climax and sitting down to read a book or think about what it would be like to write a cop comedy movie, I'm still not sure that this novel isn't satire because it's kind of ridiculous. Adding to this was the highlighted suicide bomber in the tonkatsu restaurant and Jacob's wife and child murder-suicide, which didn't do much for the story beyond making him more brooding, adding to the feeling that this might be a satire on cop dramas. I don't have any other way to interpret what I experienced with this book. At the end of it all, Jacob is a bad guy who got away with everything, and he's proud of it. He's also got the girl. So, that is my review of New Tokyo by Marc Foxx. I look forward to your thoughts in the comments down below on all of this and more. With that said, thank you so much for watching. Have a great Monday, and don't die.
Was that Wayland Cross in the trunk? Do you know, or is that something that's still being figured out?
The person in the trunk was not Wayland Cross. Is he in trouble? We don't know who did it, but as the owner of the car, the longer he's missing, the worse it looks for him.
Cross isn't a killer. For the last couple of years, the average number of murders in Baltimore has been over 300, and it's been going up. Mind you, that's only whatever the badges count as official murder, and believe me, there are people that don't count when they die. Wayland? If you're down here, tell me. I'm not talking to the badges, I've been looking for you. They found a body in your trunk. Why? Did you do that? To the left, plain black letters read along the wall. You walked in the corridor. Once that ends, you chose the dark is on the right. My vision goes blurry, flickers black and black for longer intervals until I can't see anything at all. I'm not screaming anymore, but my voice echoes back to me. Where the hell am I? You're dead, Josephine. Even smart people do stupid shit sometimes, right?